So you may not be shocked by this, but I've been thinking a lot lately about politics. I'm sure many of you are doing the same. It seems to be unavoidable right now. But wherever power is at play and decisions have to be made, politics are involved. It's inevitable. This is true of large organizations like a state or small ones like even a family household. I've been reading some books lately about history, and one topic that I find very interesting is the rise of the nation state itself. No one knows for sure where or when the first one came to be, but there seems to be an agreement on why they arose. Before the nation, hunter-gatherer societies organized themselves in bands of mostly blood-related tribes of less than 100 people. Any organization larger than this is very difficult to keep together. And then the agricultural revolution happened, and people started to settle down, grow crops, and accumulate wealth, more material possessions. However, these possessions were always at risk of being plundered by roving bandits and warring tribes. A settled community is an easy target. The solution? A stationary bandit, or in other words, a king or ruler. Instead of plundering the common citizens' valuables and food, the stationary bandit would collect taxes, also known as extortion, in exchange for protection against the roving bandits. And this is how we got the rise of large, powerful, and stationary kingdoms. Now, the tricky part for the ruler was to treat his constituents fairly enough so that they would not revolt. This is a delicate balance and can easily lead to an abuse of power on the one side by the ruling class and then a subsequent revolution by the people. See, history is replete with examples of this. Authority and power in the hands of us fallen humans, it's dangerous and it's tricky. So this last Sunday, I preached the sermon on Jesus' parable of the laborers in the vineyard, where Jesus illustrated his teaching about the kingdom of heaven, where he said, the last will be first and the first will be last. Right after that passage, Jesus predicts his suffering and death, not for the first time or the second, but for the third time. After 15 chapters of Jesus' teaching about the kingdom of heaven, and actually watching how Jesus embodied that teaching in his actions, you would think that the disciples had begun to understand what it meant to follow Jesus, to live in the kingdom, to do as he does, to think as he does. But no, they didn't get it. Right after Jesus predicts his death, in Matthew chapter 20, verse 20, we read that James and John came tagging along with their mom, who had a very special request for Jesus. She said, "Say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom." Wow, that is quite the request. Were these folks not listening to anything Jesus was saying? Were they so dull? Well, if we look hard enough, we can see ourselves in this request. We often want the seats of honor. We want recognition. We often work hard to gain the approval of man and increase our status among others. Jesus answered, "You do not know what you're asking for. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" They said, "We're able, sure." Well, the cup that Jesus was talking about was the cup of suffering, and I'm not quite sure if the disciples knew exactly what he was talking about. But then Jesus responded, "Yeah, you will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but is for the Father for whom it is prepared by my Father." So Jesus defers. He defers to the Father's authority. He knew his role, and he knew his limitations. But now in verse 24, we read that other disciples were mad at Jesus, James and John. And why were they mad at them? And it was probably not because of this poorly thought out request, betraying their sinful hearts. No, but probably they were most likely upset at James and John because they wanted to sit at Jesus' right hand and his left. They were all still thinking earthly minded, that Jesus was an earthly king, he's going to have a political revolution and set up the Messianic kingdom here and now and overthrow the Romans. But, as Jesus said to Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." And then in verse 25, Jesus teaches them all a very important lesson. He says, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. Not so with you. Stop it. Knock it off. Just get it out of your head. That's how the world works, but it's not how my kingdom works. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Emphasis was my addition there. If anyone had the ability and the right to coerce people into doing anything or saying anything, it was Jesus. If anyone had the authority and the power to destroy earthly political systems, it was Jesus. When the Jewish leaders came out against him with swords and clubs, Peter, who still didn't quite get it yet, took his sword and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant. Jesus then rebuked Peter and said, "Put your sword away. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. Do you not think that I can appeal to my Father, and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels?" Jesus had all the authority and power to enforce his will, and even to defend himself against false accusations, but he didn't. He submitted to the will of the Father. And in love for humanity, for you and for me, he laid down his life as a ransom to buy us all back from our bondage, our slavery to sin. Praise him. And now, let us honor Jesus and his sacrifice by using our positions of authority, power, and influence, not to lord it over others, but to serve others and point them to Jesus. At home, in our workplace, classroom, neighborhood, I want you to ask somebody this question. This is my challenge for you today. In the next week, I want you to ask this question. How can I help you? How can I help you? Ask that of your spouse. Kids, ask that of your parents. People at work, how can I help you? What if everyone just went around asking that question all the time? What kind of world would this be? Thanks for listening, and may God bless your day.